Hey there guys, and welcome back to Dino Reacts. So today we are looking at part 9 in the Friday series, Jason Goes to Hell. So as always guys, I'm going to give you my positives and my negatives on this movie. So without further ado, let's get to it. Let's start reviewing Jason Goes to Hell. So guys, this movie, it came out in 1993 and it was actually the first movie not to have Friday the 13th in the title. So the reason for that is Sean S. Cunningham, who really originated Friday the 13th, actually got the rights back to Jason Voorhees. Now he didn't have the rights to the actual name Friday the 13th, so instead they called the movie Jason Goes to Hell. So the overall plot guys of this movie is much different than any other Friday movie that came before it. So at the start of the movie, Jason Voorhees actually gets killed within the first 5-10 minutes of the movie. After that, his heart does remain beating, but his soul essentially goes from one person to another until he can go back into a Voorhees body. Now, if all of that sounds confusing, it's because yes, it is. This movie for me, guys, I'll be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of it. I was quite bored watching the movie overall. I wasn't really interested in what was going on, mainly because Jason Voorhees wasn't on screen. But before we go into the negatives of this movie guys, I am going to start with a few positives I have, so let's get to them. First positive I have with this movie guys is the practical effects. I love the practical effects in this movie. It's unfortunate that the one movie that really doesn't have Jason throughout is the goriest, it has the best effects, and it has some of the best kills in the franchise. The movie itself, it's a bit of a mix between The Evil Dead, The Thing, and Friday the 13th. So you have all these different kind of franchises all blended into the one film. It works in some cases, as I said, with the practical effects. Story-wise, it doesn't work as well. But talking about the practical effects guys, the kills in this movie are awesome. I gotta say, this is one of the best movies for kills overall. One kill in particular guys comes from one of my favourite scenes in any of the Friday the 13th movies. Now I'll admit I actually forgot about this kill and I forgot about this whole scene. And it is definitely my favourite scene in this movie alone. Mainly again because it's the closest to Friday the 13th. The only thing it's missing is Jason. So the scene itself, it just involves pretty much, a bunch of teenagers or young adults going back to Camp Crystal Lake because now they know Jason Voorhees is dead. So 3 teenagers, they stop off at the camp, they set up their tent, and it does feel like a proper Friday the 13th film. The kill itself though, it's 2 teenagers that are essentially having sex in the tent, and Jason comes behind the tent, impales the girl while she's having sex with the boyfriend and splits her in half. Now for me, I wish this scene was in any other Friday the 13th movie. I wish Jason Voorhees was the one doing the killing. Now some will say yes, Jason is doing the killing in that movie because it's essentially his soul in a body of the coroner, but overall I wanted to see that hockey mask, revealed essentially as she's been sliced open. But the entire look and feel of that scene guys is great. It's what you want a Friday the 13th movie to be. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie just doesn't hold up to that one singular scene. Other kills in the movie, you have Shelby who gets his face deep fried, you get somebody that gets a broken hand, and you see all of the effects on screen, so there's no cutting away. I don't know, was the MPAA on holiday at the time that they missed a lot of these kills, but thank God we get them in this movie. I did also enjoy the town of Crystal Lake as well. I thought the people in the town were actually quite interesting, they were quite cool, and I thought it was funny how they were celebrating Jason's death with this big event. As well as that guys, there are a good few kind of comedy scenes peppered in throughout the movie. I thought they were quite fun. When I was getting bored at certain parts, they definitely picked me back up. There's one character, I think his name is Steven, and his best friend from school is essentially a cop, and they do have a good lot of banter back and forth, which I enjoyed. And guys, my last positive with this movie is definitely the character of Creation Duke. I thought he was quite fun. He's definitely loopy, he's batshit crazy, and he's essentially kind of a Van Helsing character for Jason Voorhees. So he's determined to take Jason down. There were parts, of his character that I didn't like, but overall I thought he was quite fun. He was definitely the most interesting character in this movie.
Jason Voorhees.
Well, that makes me think of a little girl in a pink dress sticking a hot dog through a donut.
But guys, they are just my positives of this movie. The rest of the movie, I gotta say, I didn't enjoy. I watched this movie last week, so that's how long it's actually taken me to write a proper review of this one. I really didn't enjoy it. I'm going to start right at the beginning of the movie where we see Jason Voorhees get blown up. So the movie kind of opens like any other Friday the 13th movie. You know, we are in Camp Crystal Lake, there's some girl there showering, so it does kind of pull you in as this is going to be a regular Friday the 13th movie. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Instead, as I said, Jason gets blown up. But what I didn't like about Jason right off the bat was the look and feel of him. So his mask, it's burned into his face. Now, I don't know, was that because of the last movie when he was down in the sewers, or were they just kind of giving him a brand new look? As well as that, he has hair on his head, which he's never had in any other movie in the franchise. And to top it off, he grunts and moans every time he gets hurt or shot. That for me was quite silly, you know. It wasn't like any other Jason Voorhees. I know you can definitely update the character and you can have your own look on him, but he looked much different than the last 8 Jasons we'd seen. And as well as that, I hated that he made noises. Once he does get blown up, you know, his body, or at least the pieces of his body, get brought to a corner. His heart is still beating, and for some reason, which again, it's not hugely explained why, the coroner decides to eat his heart. So this sets off a chain of events where essentially Jason goes from one body into a next until he can find a Voorhees to go into. So that is my second negative with this movie, this entire new mythology they added in to the 9th installment. All of a sudden, you know, we have this big Voorhees family. We have Jason's long lost sister Diana and her daughter Jessica. We also have a big, you know, Voorhees house. There's a lot of new stuff going on there that really doesn't fit into any other Friday movies. And that's why this movie, it does kind of feel more like a standalone spin-off or a what if scenario. So to break it down a little bit further, guys, Jason is essentially this kind of ancient demon, ancient kind of monster that essentially attaches itself to the Voorhees family. So it goes down through their bloodlines. It doesn't make much sense if I'm honest about it, especially as, you know, when he takes over people's bodies, for some reason we can see Jason, hockey mask and all, as a reflection in the mirrors. That didn't really make a lot of sense. Even towards the end of the movie when Jason does come back, he looks the exact same. He has the hockey mask, even though he went into a different Voorhees member. The way Jason kind of gets from body to body in this movie, he kind of essentially spits out this alien-like creature that goes down people's throats. That's how he gets from body to body. Again, it is all quite silly, it's all quite stupid. Now, I will say, if this was a different movie, I would be totally in for it. You know, it was very much like Alien or The Thing or something like that, a kind of creature film. But for Jason Voorhees, a Friday the 13th film, it made absolutely no sense. There are also a lot of stupid decisions in this movie. So Jason's kind of long lost sister Diana, you know, she knows the whole family history about what happens with the Voorhees. But rather than telling people, you know, right off the bat, she gets one guy to meet her that night at about 9:30, something like that, instead of telling him there and then. So because of that, she does get killed off pretty quick into the movie, where she could have just told him a lot earlier and the movie would have probably went in a much different direction. As well as that, creating Duke, you know, he is built up as being this big cool ass character, and for the most part he is, but in the finale of this movie, again, you know, he makes some stupid, dumb decisions and he kind of gets killed off in a really just kind of boring, blah kind of way. I did find myself throughout this whole movie, you know, hoping and wondering when actually Jason did come back. Now, I did see this movie when I was young, so I did know he came back at the end of the movie, but I wasn't sure really when that would happen. So the entire movie, I kind of found myself wishing the whole middle part of the film didn't really happen, or that it would just fast forward. I wasn't interested in it. The characters, they were fun, as I said, but they also weren't characters you rooted for. They weren't characters you cared about. Even Jessica, the main character, so Jason's niece, you know, she wasn't the most interesting character at all. She didn't trust a lot of people. She also made quite a lot of stupid decisions. So it was hard to kind of attach yourself to a character, and on top of that, Jason wasn't there to even root for him. So guys, my last negative with this movie is the absolute terrible finale. Now again, the practical effects are quite great. I love the practical effects in the last act of the movie, but story wise and just kind of where everything goes, is quite shite.
I've two words to say to that. Shite!
What's the other one?
Shite!
Creating Duke, he kind of gives Jessica this kind of a magic dagger that can kill Jason Voorhees. So it's a dagger that's, you know, been passed down through centuries. Why it wasn't used in all the other movies, I do not know, but it does finally get used in this movie. It kind of goes into the Thing territory. That's what it reminded me of. Get this kind of weird creature thing that's kind of running around the house. Eventually, it does go into Diana Voorhees in a really strange way, and we get the return of Jason, hockey mask and all. So he kind of fights with the main characters. Creating Duke does get killed off in, again, as I said, a very silly way, and we're left with Paul and Jessica. From there, Paul, he does distract Jason long enough for Jessica to stab Jason with the magic dagger, and another sequence comes into play where we get these kind of lights coming out of Jason Voorhees, again looking quite silly, and then coming back into him before the hands from the dead from hell rise up and pull Jason under the ground. I'm not sure what to make of that whole scene. Again, it was so just out there and bizarre, totally different than any other Friday the 13th movie, but it was what it was. Again, the way it looked, the way they shot those practical effects, I was a fan of. I just hated the story. Finally guys, the last scene of this movie, it does have Freddy Krueger's glove coming up from the ground and pulling Jason's mask down to hell. Now, whether this whole movie when you saw it in the cinema was terrible, I'm sure that one scene alone must have been great to watch. Unfortunately for fans of both franchises, they wouldn't get to see the face-off till a decade later, but at the time I'm guessing that was absolutely huge. People must have been buzzing about that. I know when I was young, I always loved that scene, but I never really believed that they were going to do the face-off. We did get it finally, but one more movie we have to go through before we get to that. Overall guys, I wasn't a fan of this movie. It is definitely one of the worst in the franchise, mainly as I said because Jason Voorhees is not in it. I get what they were doing. It was definitely, you know, an interesting choice to go down that route. As I said, the practical effects are great. The kills in this movie are some of the best in the entire franchise. The problem was they kind of made an alien type film out of Friday the 13th, which I don't think slasher fans wanted. If we want to see that, we will go and watch those movies, but we just like good old-fashioned slashers. So guys, that is my review of Jason Goes to Hell. If you like this review, give the video a like, comment below and let me know your thoughts on this movie, whether you liked it or not. Don't forget guys, subscribe to the channel just so you don't miss another video, and until next time, Heidi ho.